My girlfriend declared. I could have anyone I want. You're lucky I chose you. I nodded. Good to know. These words came after 2.5 years of what I thought was building something real with Madison, though I should have recognized the warning signs much earlier when she started treating our relationship like a performance piece for her social media empire. I'm Ethan, 29, a portfolio manager at a mid-sized investment firm in Seattle, making a comfortable living analyzing market trends and managing client portfolios, and I'd been dating Madison, a 26-year-old social media influencer who never let me forget how fortunate I was to be with someone of her caliber and follower count. Looking back, I can see how gradually she'd eroded my confidence over the months, turning every conversation into an opportunity to remind me of my shortcomings compared to the mythical perfect boyfriends she saw on Instagram. That Thursday evening started like any other. We were getting ready for our usual coffee date at Moonrise Cafe, where Madison liked to hold court every week, live streaming her authentic coffee shop aesthetic to her 50,000 devoted followers who hung on her every word about lifestyle and relationships. The routine had become predictable. She'd spend 45 minutes perfecting her makeup and outfit while I waited, then we'd walk to the trendy Pike Place area cafe where she'd position herself at the corner table with the best lighting and proceed to document our entire evening for content. I was putting on my jacket when she launched into another lecture about my inadequacies, this time triggered by my innocent suggestion that we might skip the cafe and cook dinner together at my waterfront condo instead, maybe watch a movie and actually talk to each other without the constant interruption of her phone notifications. You never want to go anywhere that matters, she said, not looking up from adjusting her ring light setup on my dining table. You're so boring, Ethan. Do you know how many guys would kill to be seen with me? I get hundreds of DMs every day from successful men, real entrepreneurs, athletes, influencers with millions of followers, who actually understand what it takes to keep a woman like me happy. I'd heard variations of this speech countless times, usually delivered whenever I showed any sign of not being sufficiently grateful for her presence in my life, but the venom in her voice tonight felt particularly calculated and cruel. You work in finance, but you live like you're broke, she continued, checking her reflection in her phone camera and adjusting her angles. When was the last time you took me somewhere Instagram-worthy? When was the last time you bought me something that would make other women jealous? I'm literally wasting my prime years on someone who doesn't even appreciate what he has, and my followers are starting to notice that you never appear in my content anymore. I stood there watching her transform into her online persona, applying the perfect amount of lip gloss while practicing her expressions in the camera, and something inside me finally snapped, not into anger or desperation, but into a cold, clear understanding of exactly what this relationship had become. Madison, I said quietly, setting my jacket back down, what exactly do you think you're getting out of this relationship? She whirled around from her setup, clearly expecting me to apologize for interrupting her pre-streaming routine and beg for her attention like I usually did. What am I getting? I'm getting the absolute bare minimum from someone who should be worshipping the ground I walk on. Look at me, Ethan, really look at me. I could have anyone I want, literally anyone in this city or any other city. You're incredibly lucky I chose you instead of all those DMs sliding into my inbox from actual successful men who know how to treat a woman properly. The words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud, and for once, I didn't feel the familiar stab of inadequacy that usually followed her casual cruelty. Instead, I felt something like relief washing over me as the truth became crystal clear. This wasn't love, it wasn't even like, it was a one-sided performance where I was perpetually the disappointing supporting actor in her carefully curated life story. You know what's funny? I said, genuinely curious about something that had just occurred to me. You keep talking about all these amazing options you have, but you're still here with boring, inadequate me. Why is that? Her perfectly contoured face flushed with irritation at having her narrative questioned. Because I'm loyal, Ethan. Because I believe in giving people chances to improve themselves. But my patience isn't infinite, and frankly, you're testing it every single day with your complete lack of ambition and appreciation. Good to know, I said, grabbing my keys from the counter with a sense of finality that surprised even me. Where are you going? she called after me, genuinely shocked that I wasn't staying to absorb more punishment and promised to do better like I always did. You just told me you could have anyone you want and that I'm incredibly lucky you chose me. I figure I should stop getting in the way of you finding someone who actually deserves you. I walked out of my own condo, leaving her standing there with her mouth open and her ring lights still glowing, probably for the first time in years rendered completely speechless and off-script. The elevator ride down felt like the first full breath I'd taken in months, and by the time I reached the parking garage, I was already pulling up my property manager's contact information to change the security codes on my downtown lease. I checked into the Grand Hyatt that night, not out of drama or spite, but because I needed space to think clearly about what came next, and I knew Madison would spend the evening blowing up my phone with the usual cycle of rage followed by manipulation followed by fake tearful apologies designed to reel me back in. I woke up Friday morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, and the first person who came to mind was Claire Davidson, a brilliant environmental scientist I'd met at a tech conference 4 months earlier when she was presenting her research on sustainable urban development to a packed auditorium of professionals who hung on her every word about innovative water treatment solutions. Even though she knew about Madison through our mutual LinkedIn connections and had seen the carefully curated photos Madison posted of us together at various Seattle hotspots, Claire had made her interest unmistakably clear during our conversation at the networking reception, asking genuinely thoughtful questions about my work in portfolio management while maintaining the kind of eye contact that lasted just a beat longer than professional courtesy required. I remembered how refreshing it had been to talk to someone who was genuinely curious about market analysis and investment strategies rather than seeing my career as merely a means to fund designer handbags and expensive dinners at restaurants chosen primarily for their Instagram potential. Claire had given me her card with a handwritten note on the back that said, "Would love to continue this conversation over coffee sometime. Your perspective on sustainable investing was fascinating, and I'd kept it in my wallet ever since." Occasionally pulling it out during Madison's more exhausting tirades and wondering what it would be like to date someone who valued intellectual conversation over curated social media aesthetics. Now seemed like the perfect time to find out, so I sent Claire a carefully crafted message explaining that I'd recently become single and wondered if she'd be interested in joining me for coffee at Moonrise Cafe the next evening, the exact spot where Madison held court every Thursday, live streaming her authentic coffee shop aesthetic to her devoted followers who treated her relationship advice like divine wisdom. Claire's response came within an hour, and her enthusiasm was immediately apparent and genuinely refreshing. "I'd absolutely love to. I've been hoping you'd reach out ever since that conference." Thursday at Moonrise sounds perfect. I've heard incredible things about their Ethiopian single-origin roast, and I'm always excited about exploring new neighborhoods in Seattle. Her message was intelligent, direct, and completely free of the calculated manipulation and emotional landmines that had become Madison's primary form of communication over the past year, and I found myself genuinely excited about the prospect of spending an evening with someone who seemed interested in me as a complete person rather than as a walking credit card with adequate social media presence. I spent Thursday strategically preparing for what I knew would be psychological warfare disguised as a casual coffee date, starting with a visit to my personal shopper friend Andrew, who worked at Nordstrom and had been quietly suggesting for months that I deserved better than someone who constantly criticized my appearance while contributing absolutely nothing to improve either my wardrobe or my confidence. "Finally coming to your senses about that Instagram princess?" Andrew asked with a knowing grin as he pulled together a sharp but effortlessly casual outfit that would photograph well under cafe lighting while still looking naturally put together rather than overly calculated. "Something like that," I replied, admiring the way the charcoal Henley and perfectly fitted dark jeans combination made me look more confident and self-assured than I'd felt in months of walking on eggshells around Madison's volatile moods. Next stop was an upscale barbershop in Capitol Hill where I got a precision cut that took 5 years off my appearance and reminded me why I used to actually enjoy getting ready for dates instead of dreading them like performances where I was always falling short of some impossible standard. Meanwhile, my phone had been buzzing constantly with increasingly desperate voice messages from Madison, who had apparently spent the entire night cycling through every manipulation tactic in her well-worn arsenal. First came the predictably angry messages about my childish behavior, and pathetic attempt at revenge, followed by tearful apologies claiming she didn't mean what she said and was just stressed about planning our future together. Then finally the seductive messages about how much she missed me already and desperately wanted to make things right between us tonight. I listened to exactly one of these carefully crafted messages before putting my phone on permanent silent, recognizing the familiar pattern of someone who only valued what they thought they were losing and would inevitably go right back to taking me for granted the moment I showed any sign of weakness or willingness to return to our toxic dynamic. By Thursday afternoon, I was mentally rehearsing for the chess match ahead, knowing that Madison would arrive at moonrise expecting to find me alone and defeated, providing the perfect backdrop for her to publicly shame me while documenting the entire drama for her Instagram stories and building sympathy from her followers about how toxic men can't handle strong women who know their worth. At exactly 6:30 Thursday evening, I arrived at the trendy Moonrise Cafe with Claire by my side, and the immediate shift in atmospheric energy was unmistakable as her natural charisma and genuine laughter drew curious glances from the usual Thursday evening crowd of young professionals and aspiring influencers who gathered there weekly. Claire looked absolutely stunning in an effortless way that Madison could never achieve despite spending hours in front of mirrors. She wore a simple emerald sweater that brought out her eyes and dark jeans that suggested confidence rather than desperation, and when she laughed at something I said about the quirky local art installations, the sound was so authentic and infectious that nearby conversations actually paused. Madison had already claimed her signature corner table, the one with optimal lighting for her live streams, and was in the middle of orchestrating her typical dramatic monologue to her phone camera about authentic relationships and recognizing your worth when she spotted us walking in together, clearly enjoying each other's intelligent conversation about sustainable urban planning and investment opportunities in green technology. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Madison froze mid-sentence with her phone still recording, her carefully practiced influencer smile faltering as she processed the sight of me not only looking better than I had in months, but accompanied by an accomplished, radiant woman who seemed genuinely fascinated by everything I had to say rather than merely tolerating my presence. I watched Madison's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and what looked like genuine panic as she realized that her grand plan to publicly humiliate me was backfiring spectacularly in front of her live audience. Our mutual acquaintances Jake and Sophie, regulars at the Thursday coffee scene who Madison often recruited as background props for her content creation, stared in obvious shock from their nearby table. They had clearly expected to witness my public groveling and desperate attempts to win back the woman who'd been telling anyone who would listen that I was lucky to have her, not my confident introduction of an accomplished, beautiful woman who seemed to actually enjoy my company. "This place has such great energy," Claire said, settling into our table with the kind of natural grace that can't be faked or practiced in front of ring lights. "I can see why you like coming here. The coffee really is exceptional, and I love how they source directly from sustainable farms." I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't experienced in months, actually enjoying a conversation that didn't revolve around social media metrics or who was wearing what designer outfit, when Madison approached our table with her practiced influencer smile plastered on her face and her phone conveniently positioned to capture whatever dramatic content she was planning to create. "Ethan, what a surprise to see you here," she said with fake cheerfulness, clearly attempting to salvage her narrative while her live stream continued recording in the background. "And you must be the rebound girl I've been hearing about." "I'm Madison, Ethan's girlfriend. Well, ex-girlfriend now, I suppose, though we all know how these little breakup phases work out." Claire looked up from her coffee with the kind of polite but unimpressed expression that suggested she dealt with difficult personalities in her professional life and wasn't particularly intimidated by amateur dramatics. "Claire Davidson," she replied simply, extending her hand with confident professionalism. "Ethan's told me so much about you." The subtle emphasis on "told me" carried just enough weight to suggest that those conversations hadn't been particularly flattering, and I watched Madison's confident facade crack slightly as she realized she wasn't controlling this interaction the way she'd planned. "How interesting that you're already moving on so quickly," Madison continued, her voice gaining that sharp edge I knew so well, still playing to her phone camera. Though I suppose some people cope with rejection differently than others. It must be nice to be someone's consolation prize. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, and I felt a calm certainty settle over me as I looked directly at Madison with the kind of steady confidence that comes from finally understanding your own worth. You said you could have anyone you want, so I figured I should stop preventing that from happening, I replied evenly, my voice carrying just far enough for the nearby tables to hear. Besides, Claire and I have been looking forward to this coffee date for weeks. The color drained from Madison's face as she realized her own arrogant declaration from our breakup fight was being turned against her in front of her live audience, and I could see her scrambling to regain control of a narrative that was slipping away from her completely. "Well," she said, her voice rising slightly with barely controlled desperation, "I hope you're both very happy together in your little rebound situation. Some of us believe in working through problems instead of running away to the first available option." Claire set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision and looked at Madison with the kind of calm authority that comes from years of presenting research to skeptical audiences. "Actually, Ethan and I met months ago at a professional conference where he was genuinely interested in my work on environmental sustainability. It's refreshing to meet someone who values intellectual conversation and genuine connection over social media drama." The quiet devastation of that response hung in the air as Madison realized she'd been completely outmaneuvered by someone who didn't need to raise her voice or create scenes to command respect, and I watched her phone shake slightly in her hand as she struggled to figure out how to spin this encounter for her followers who were undoubtedly watching her confident prediction about my desperate return completely fall apart in real time. The days following our cafe encounter escalated into what I can only describe as digital warfare, as Madison weaponized her 50,000 Instagram followers against my reputation with a carefully orchestrated campaign of victimization that would have been impressive if it wasn't so transparently malicious. Within hours of our public confrontation, she had crafted a series of tear-jerking posts about narcissistic financial abuse and emotional manipulation by toxic men who abandon their partners the moment they find someone more convenient, complete with professionally staged crying selfies that generated thousands of sympathetic comments from followers who had no idea about the real story behind her carefully constructed victim narrative. Her posts were masterfully designed to generate maximum outrage, sepia-toned photos of her looking devastated with captions about how some men will string you along for years, making you think you have a future together, then discard you like garbage the moment someone shinier comes along, followed by inspirational quotes about recognizing red flags and never settling for men who don't appreciate queens. The engagement was extraordinary, hundreds of comments calling me everything from a disgusting user to a pathetic narcissist, with her followers sharing stories about their own experiences with financially abusive losers and promising to expose men like me who prey on beautiful, successful women. But Madison's campaign went far beyond social media manipulation into genuinely dangerous territory when she began targeting my professional life with a systematic attack designed to destroy my career in financial services. She started making anonymous calls to my investment firm's compliance department, claiming to be a concerned client who had heard disturbing rumors about my alleged gambling addiction and unprofessional behavior with female clients, hoping to trigger regulatory investigations that could destroy my Series 7 license and permanently derail my career trajectory in finance. My assistant, Jennifer, warned me about the suspicious calls from supposed potential clients who seemed more interested in asking probing questions about my personal life than discussing portfolio management strategies. "There's something off about these inquiries," she told me during our Monday morning meeting. "They're asking weird questions about your stability and whether you've ever had financial problems, like they're fishing for specific information rather than actually wanting investment advice." I immediately scheduled an emergency meeting with my managing directors, armed with screenshots I'd wisely saved of Madison's previous threats to destroy my professional reputation during her more volatile meltdowns over the past several months. These documented threats proved invaluable when I explained the situation to my supervisors, who initially expressed concern about potential regulatory implications but became fully supportive once they understood the scope of the coordinated defamation campaign being waged against both me personally and the firm by association. Our corporate security consultant, a former FBI investigator named Marcus Webb, launched a comprehensive digital forensics investigation and quickly discovered that Madison had been creating fake LinkedIn profiles using stock photos and fabricated credentials to contact my clients directly with carefully crafted stories about my alleged incompetence and unprofessional conduct. The evidence was overwhelming: email trails, IP address tracking, and sophisticated social media analysis that revealed the scope of her campaign, including attempts to contact financial industry regulators with false complaints about my licensing and professional ethics. This goes way beyond typical breakup drama, Marcus explained during our security briefing. She's engaged in targeted harassment that could be prosecuted as both cyberstalking and attempted securities fraud, especially given her deliberate efforts to interfere with your professional licenses and client relationships. The firm's legal department was particularly concerned about Madison's attempts to impersonate potential clients during recorded phone calls with our junior analysts, which created potential liability issues and violated multiple federal regulations governing financial services communications. When Madison finally demanded access to retrieve her belongings from what she persistently called our condo despite never contributing a single dollar to mortgage payments, utilities, or even basic household expenses during our entire relationship, I decided to orchestrate what would become the most brilliantly calculated response of this entire psychological chess match. Rather than engage in the dramatic confrontation she was clearly expecting, I hired Premium Moving Solutions, one of Seattle's most professional relocation companies, to carefully catalog and relocate all of Madison's expensive camera equipment, ring lights, designer backdrop props, and professional photography gear to a climate-controlled storage facility across town, while having her personal clothing and accessories professionally packed and inventoried in clearly labeled containers by the front door. I spent considerable time and money ensuring that every item was photographed, documented, and handled with the kind of care that would make any legal challenge impossible, creating a paper trail that demonstrated my respect for her property while establishing clear boundaries about access to my home. Madison arrived at my waterfront condo the following Saturday afternoon with her enabler's sister Brooklyn and her photographer friend Jackson, clearly expecting to manipulate her way back into the luxury downtown space where she'd lived rent-free for months while treating me like a convenient ATM with adequate bedroom skills. What she discovered instead was a completely transformed living space that no longer bore any trace of her previous occupation, with Claire comfortably settled at my kitchen island preparing ingredients for dinner while discussing our plans for a weekend exploring the Olympic Peninsula's art galleries and local wineries. The sight of another woman so naturally and confidently integrated into my domestic space triggered what I can only describe as Madison's complete psychological breakdown, as the reality of being genuinely replaced rather than temporarily inconvenienced finally penetrated her narcissistic worldview. "What the hell is this?" Madison shrieked, her carefully maintained influencer composure evaporating instantly as she stared at Claire, who looked up from her meal preparation with polite curiosity rather than the intimidation Madison had probably expected. "This is my home," I replied calmly, "and Claire is my guest. Your belongings are packed and ready to go, along with an itemized inventory for your records." But Madison's rage wasn't focused on logistics. It was the visceral shock of seeing her replacement living the life she'd taken for granted, and she immediately pulled out her phone to begin live streaming her own breakdown while screaming about being erased from his life and replaced by some random nobody who probably doesn't even have an Instagram following. Brooklyn tried to intervene by threatening to call both the police and their family lawyer, but I calmly set a 15-minute timer on my phone and informed them that building security would escort them out when it expired, a boundary I'd established with the property management company earlier that week. The nuclear meltdown reached its crescendo when Madison spotted the new artwork Claire had helped me select for the living room walls, abstract pieces from local Seattle artists that reflected our shared interest in supporting the regional creative community, and she completely lost control, grabbing one of the framed pieces and smashing it against the hardwood floor while screaming that I was trying to erase every trace of our relationship like it never mattered. Claire remained remarkably composed throughout this entire display, simply moving to the far side of the kitchen and quietly observing Madison's self-destructive tantrum with the detached professionalism of someone who had probably dealt with volatile personalities in her scientific research career. "I think your 15 minutes are up," Claire said softly when Madison began throwing her own packed belongings around the entryway, and I didn't hesitate to follow through on my promise by pressing the speed dial for building security, who arrived within 3 minutes and professionally escorted all 3 of them out of the building while Madison continued live streaming her breakdown and making increasingly desperate threats about legal action that would never materialize. My investment firm's comprehensive investigation into Madison's harassment campaign uncovered evidence that went far beyond typical breakup drama into genuinely criminal territory, as our cybersecurity team traced her digital fingerprints across multiple sophisticated schemes designed to destroy both my career and the firm's reputation in the financial services industry. The scope of her campaign was breathtaking in its calculated malice. She had created at least 7 fake LinkedIn profiles using stolen photos and fabricated professional credentials to impersonate prospective high-net-worth clients, then used these personas to contact our junior analysts with detailed questions about my competence, stability, and professional ethics while secretly recording these conversations for potential future use. More seriously, she had been systematically contacting financial industry regulatory bodies including FINRA and the SEC with anonymous tips about my alleged gambling addiction, substance abuse problems, and inappropriate relationships with female clients, hoping to trigger compliance investigations that could permanently revoke my Series 7 license and destroy my ability to work in investment management. Marcus Webb, our corporate security consultant, presented his findings to the firm's executive committee with the kind of thoroughness that comes from decades of federal law enforcement experience, documenting not just Madison's current campaign but her escalating pattern of harassment that had begun weeks before our actual breakup. "She's been planning this systematic destruction for at least a month," Marcus explained during our security briefing, showing email timestamps and metadata analysis that revealed the premeditated nature of her attacks. "This isn't emotional retaliation, it's calculated warfare designed to inflict maximum professional and financial damage." The evidence included attempts to access confidential client portfolio information through social engineering attacks on our administrative staff, where Madison had impersonated family members and romantic partners of actual clients to gain sensitive account details that could be used for identity theft or market manipulation schemes. Meanwhile, the professional storage company that housed Madison's expensive camera equipment and designer props began sending her monthly bills that she apparently had no intention of paying, since her entire lifestyle had been funded by my income and she had no actual savings or credit available for unexpected expenses like storage fees. When she ignored multiple payment notices and pickup scheduling requests, Premium Moving Solutions initiated legal proceedings to auction her high-end photography gear, professional lighting equipment, and collection of designer backdrop props that had probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Each automated auction notice generated detailed emails with sale proceeds minus legal fees and storage costs, creating a constant financial reminder of the consequences of her destructive choices and the reality that her influencer lifestyle had been entirely dependent on my financial support. Most devastatingly for her long-term career prospects, our legal team contacted Stellar Talent Management, Madison's influencer marketing agency, about the ongoing harassment campaign and its potential liability implications for the agency's other clients who worked in financial services content creation. The agency's risk management department was particularly concerned about Madison's documented attempts to interfere with federal financial regulations, which violated multiple clauses in her talent contract regarding professional conduct and could expose the agency to regulatory scrutiny from the very government bodies they worked with to ensure compliance in sponsored financial content. Within 2 weeks of our legal notification, Stellar Talent Management terminated Madison's representation contract and issued a company-wide memo to all their influencer clients about the importance of maintaining professional boundaries and avoiding any activities that could be construed as harassment or regulatory interference. 10 months later, the complete reversal of our circumstances tells a story that perfectly illustrates the difference between building something meaningful versus destroying everything out of spite and narcissistic rage. Madison has lost virtually everything that once defined her carefully constructed online persona. Her talent management contract disappeared after the harassment investigation, her follower count plummeted from 50,000 to barely 12,000 as her increasingly erratic content drove away sponsors and genuine supporters alike. And she was eventually forced to move back with her parents in suburban Tacoma while facing ongoing civil litigation for her systematic defamation campaign against both me and my investment firm. Her once pristine Instagram feed, which used to showcase luxury lifestyle content and relationship advice that generated substantial influencer income, has devolved into a desperate collection of increasingly unhinged posts that generate more secondhand embarrassment than meaningful engagement from her remaining followers. The transformation has been remarkable to witness from a distance, where she once posted carefully curated content about knowing your worth and demanding the treatment you deserve. She now shares bitter motivational quotes about toxic men and narcissistic abuse that read more like personal therapy sessions than professional content creation. Her recent posts include rambling video rants about men who use women for emotional labor then discard them, and fake people who steal your life and pretend it was always theirs, accompanied by comment sections filled with concerned followers asking if she needs professional help rather than the validation she's clearly seeking. Ethan, conversely, has experienced what I can only describe as a complete professional and personal renaissance that began the moment I stopped allowing someone else's insecurities and manipulations to define my self-worth and career trajectory. My exemplary handling of Madison's targeted defamation campaign impressed the firm's partners so much that I was promoted to senior portfolio manager with a substantial salary increase and expanded responsibilities for managing high-net-worth client relationships, particularly those involving sustainable investment strategies where my collaboration with Claire has provided valuable insights. My relationship with Claire has blossomed into the kind of genuine partnership I never knew was possible, built on shared intellectual curiosity, mutual respect, and the simple pleasure of being with someone who appreciates thoughtful planning and meaningful conversation over social media validation and manufactured drama. We've purchased a beautiful craftsman-style home in Seattle's Wallingford neighborhood, where I've built a fully equipped workshop for my weekend woodworking projects, and Claire has established a home laboratory for her environmental consulting practice, creating a space that reflects both our individual passions and our shared commitment to building something lasting together. Our weekends are spent exploring Pacific Northwest art galleries, visiting local wineries, working on home improvement projects that we plan and execute together, and enjoying the kind of quiet domestic happiness that doesn't require documentation or external validation to feel meaningful and complete. The revenge, I've come to realize, was never about dramatic public humiliation or elaborate schemes to make Madison suffer. It was simply about walking away from toxicity with dignity and allowing natural consequences to unfold while I focused on building something authentically meaningful with someone who values me as an equal partner rather than a convenient prop for social media content and financial support. When I occasionally hear updates about Madison's situation through mutual acquaintances, I feel only a distant sense of sadness for someone who had genuine opportunities for happiness but chose destruction over growth, manipulation over honesty, and bitter victimhood over taking responsibility for her own choices and their inevitable consequences.